This is Radio Paul, and this episode naturally has to do with Scientology. Yep, that lovely topic once again. And as many of you may be aware, the New Yorker and the Today Show have recently done bits on human trafficking in Scientology. For anyone listening to this that has not either seen the Today Show episode or read the New Yorker article, I would suggest that you do so, especially if you're a Scientologist. It does start out a little bit boring in the New Yorker. It's about, I think, page 14 before you start getting into the FBI investigation and the human trafficking allegations. So stick with it. It's well worth it. In fact, even the information up to that point is interesting. I do want to talk a little bit about why, if you have ever been in Scientology, that you should file a police report or a complaint with the FBI, no matter how long ago your abuse was. Even if you have to send them a certified letter, which they're required to accept, and once they accept something, they have to keep it. They can't throw out that kind of information. And if for no other reason, you should share your experiences of abuse with law enforcement, whether it be local or federal, because it gives them the ability to have insight. They see patterns of abuse. And perhaps one day they will, if again, for no other reason, have a witness or a victim that they're dealing with that falls within the scope of statute of limitations. And they need to be able to ask the right questions. And when you're dealing with a cult like Scientology, they are very good at having their own language, coaching people to answer questions a certain way. But if the law enforcement investigators can get inside the head of a Scientology victim, and they can have a strategy to get to the right question so that they're not wasting their time and that they're able to ask fruitful questions and kind of detect when the person isn't feeling comfortable answering the questions, that could be extremely useful. As a side note, yes, if they're looking at human trafficking, just because your particular charge or allegations, statute of limitations might have run out, there may be a broader crime that was involved, and what happened to you may very well fall into that statute of limitations. A simple assault against you in a county or a state, there may be nothing you can do about it, but in the grand scope of a human trafficking charge, a kidnapping charge, something where there isn't a statute of limitations, what you have to say may be very pertinent. So my advice to you is get your message out. Write up what happened to you. Tell the world. It's now safe. Everybody is telling their stories, and there are people out there to support you. You have ex-members of Scientology that still practice, like Marty Rathburn, Mike Render, that will certainly listen to what you have to say. There are people like Mark Bunker, Tori Magoo, who, Tori Magoo's an ex-member, Mark Bunker is a reporter. These people will listen to you. They will give your voice meaning. So by all means, communicate what has happened to you. But very important, in my opinion, that if you were abused, that you tell the truth and you document it. And I guess, I want to say, now is your time. People are ready to listen to you. And I want to take a moment and talk about what is human trafficking. Well, if you look at the New Yorker article, it's wide-ranging. But one has to ask, like, if Mark Headley could be run off the road and people were trying to drag him back, and they can't say that he wasn't run off the road. This was witnessed by the sheriff's deputies, and they intervened and helped Mark get out of there. If inward-facing spikes and observation posts across a highway to watch the main gates are not part of human trafficking, I don't know what is. If coerced abortions bringing people overseas into the United States using religious worker exemptions to get slave labor out of them for $50 a week isn't a form of human trafficking. I don't know what is. If using child labor and having children sign up for the Sea Org isn't human trafficking, I don't know what is. If showing up at your house with 9 members of Scientology, which is apparently happened to Paul Haggis and is a regular practice anytime someone tries to leave Scientology, to harass and to coerce the person into being silent and not leaving, if that isn't human trafficking, I don't know what is. If forcing someone, making them believe that they have to repay freeloaders' debt when they're not legally required to do so, if that isn't part of human trafficking, I don't know what is. If the many things that Scientology says that they engage in, not the things that they deny, but things like Tommy Davis's admission of disconnection, breaking up families, if, in the Larry Anderson tapes, where he's threatening Larry Anderson that he won't get his money back if he speaks out publicly. These are forms of trying to control and intimidate people. The very fact that they would have things like the Rehabilitation Project Force and ex-members talking about brutal conditions that they were put through. If smearing people for sexual improprieties or alleged sexual improprieties isn't part of controlling people or human trafficking, I don't know what it is. Amy Scobie, they've accused her of extramarital affairs. So what? What has that got to do? Why would they need to use that? The only reason to use that is to try to discredit her. There's this great video I saw online back in the day where Kendrick Moxon was being interviewed, and he was accusing some woman of being a stripper. I believe it was being a stripper. And the reporter said, that's not true. It's been debunked. And he's sitting there smirking at the camera. There's this privilege that they feel that they have to destroy other people's lives. A stated policy that they have of suing to harass critics into silence, and that the point of a lawsuit is not to win. It's to harass people into silence. Okay, well, that's not necessarily human trafficking, but again, that shows a round pattern of that. If they're willing to say that when someone says it was done to them, you kind of have to believe them. So anyway, if you are a Scientologist and you have a story to tell about abuse, my advice to you is document it. You never know when you might need to rely on that down the road. You never know when it might become important. But if it isn't documented, law enforcement can't do anything with it. So you've got a voice, you got people behind you. Speak up, stand up, and know that the tide isn't just turning, it has turned, and the world is listening. So anyway, this is Radio Paul, and that's my rant.